Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome back to The Stolen Land, Episode 13, The Upper Thorn River. As was the norm for the expedition, they left at first light, letting themselves out through the gate at Oleg's trading post. It only took a few hours for them to reach the edge of the forest and start their mapping for the day. As they entered the forest once again, it struck them that this was truly a forest in the actual wilderness. There were some game trails here and there, but they were more indentations in the foliage than anything resembling a path. The ground was dead leaves, as thick as they could find, and sticking up from the dead leaves there was ferns, ivy, and various berry bushes, going up to about knee height. Dead trees were falling everywhere, with more ivy and mushrooms covering them. It was one thing when they walked through the forest with a goal in mind a few months ago, but now, as summer was approaching its end, and they were now wandering every inch of the forest, an entirely different sense of the forest fell over them. It was mid-afternoon when they came across an arrowhead-shaped clearing in which grew a large patch of wild moon radishes. Laying among the radishes were 4 moaning kobolds on their backs, with clearly engorged bellies from eating the radishes. Their spears lay haphazardly on the ground near them. Once the kobolds noticed the expedition, they got up as quickly as they could, grabbed their spears, and prepared to fight. Umbria began the fight by protecting herself with magical armor. Not only were the party not expecting to run across kobolds, but they were very much not expecting to find hostile kobolds after their dealings with the soot scales. The kobolds closed the distance to the group surprisingly quickly for how sick and full they looked. 2 went after Lucian, one of the spears managing to find the tiniest gap in his armor and opened a cut in his skin. 1 went after Tiber, who was able to knock the spear out of the hand of the kobold, and the 4th one tried attacking Petra, who parried easily with her short swords. Petra struck back at her attacker, who managed to knock one of her swords aside. Unfortunately for the kobold, as it was parrying one blade, it left itself wide open for the other, as it became the first kobold to fall. Tiber struck at the kobold attacking him, bringing the group of attackers down to half what it had started at. Lucian swung his long sword at one of the 2 kobolds that were prodding him with spears, and it fell with a scream. The last remaining kobold dug in its heels and started talking in a language none of them spoke. Umbria shot a magic missile at the last remaining kobold, and suddenly, there were none. As they cleaned off their weapons and Petra began collecting what little loot the kobolds had, Lucian looked over the patch. Well, they clearly believed this was theirs. Given that they fought to the death, these must be some good radishes. He looked over to Umbria. Make sure you map this place in a way that we'll be able to find it, but it won't be readily apparent that there's something worthwhile here. This is a natural resource we'll want if we end up the lords of this land, but if we make it too obvious, then it will be over-harvested. And given the size of this patch, that wouldn't be very hard to do. After a short stop in the clearing, one of only a handful they'd come across that day, they continued on through the forest. The rest of the day continued without incident, and that evening the group found another clearing they set up camp in. Near the end of the night, during Lucian's watch, he heard the noises of something crashing through the forest heading their way. He was able to wake everyone up in time for Tiber to put on his armor and have everyone ready to fight the thing before the large mass of vines crashed into the clearing. Petra took out her hand axes and charged in as the creature was still getting its bearings. She cut deep into a vine with her first cut, severing it from the mass. Her second cut was not as successful, however. Lucian rushed forward with his sword and joined Petra in hacking away at it. He succeeded in cutting away some more of the vines. Several of the vines snaked out at Lucian, who cut at them, hacking away. Although he was able to hack away at many of the vines, there were just too many of them in the end, and he became enveloped by the creature, which began to crush him. Seeing their leader being crushed by a mold of vines, Umbria and Tiber jumped into action. Umbria ran up to the creature and grabbed 2 vines with both hands, which were now glowing blue. The creature recoiled in pain as the vines turned brown, radiating out from where Umbria had grabbed them. Tiber hacked at the creature some more, trying to free Lucian. Petra jumped into the creature, swinging her axes for all she was worth, pushing her way into it before it finally went limp, collapsing to the ground. Lucian rolled out, laying on his back beside the creature. Tiber knelt down next to him and cast Curing Magic multiple times on him. Well, boss, that certainly was one way to wake up. Lucian laughed a little before groaning and grabbing his torso. With his free hand, he pointed over to the fire. There should be things ready to start breakfast there. I didn't get a chance to actually start it before I heard that thing. Umbria walked over to the creature and studied it for a moment. We're very lucky. This is known as a shambling mound. They generally don't go on the hunt like this one clearly was, but there's nothing stopping them from doing so. The issue, and the reason we are so lucky, is generally these things are almost silent, and in a forest like this, they're able to hide extremely well. This thing should have been able to get right up next to the camp before being spotted. She looked at Lucian. It's not out of the question that it could have crushed you to death before you alerted us. Then it should have been able to kill us one by one in our sleep. I have no idea what was wrong with this one, but I'm glad something was. Her words sobered everyone for a few minutes while Tiber started making breakfast. Luckily, they had shaken the mood off by the end of breakfast, as they set out to start mapping the upper Thorn River. Early on in the day, they came across the remains of the bandit camp they had cleared when they first arrived in the area. The forest was already reclaiming the area, and it wouldn't be more than a few years before there was nothing left of the camp. That would prove to be the only thing of interest that day, however, as they peacefully mapped out that part of the river and the immediate area to either side. And that night would also prove to be uneventful. The next day, they continued up the river even farther, getting closer and closer to its source. The day passed in peace and calmness as they fell back into the rhythm they were getting ever more used to as they continued to map parts of the Greenbelt. That night, Umbria spotted what looked like a lantern bobbing just outside of camp. As she watched it, it dawned on her that beyond how unlikely it was that someone would be out this far into the wilderness at night, apparently alone, this light didn't move quite like a lantern should. It was a good imitation, but there was just something off about it that she couldn't shake. She quietly woke the others and told them to prepare for battle. I think we have a will-o-wisp sniffing around our camp. It should become angry and either leave or attack our camp soon. We need to get ready. Umbria's warning came at the perfect time as it turned out. No sooner had Lucian finished strapping on the last of his armor when the lantern light they had been watching zoomed toward camp. Be careful, it's immune to almost all magic, Umbria shouted. Tiber slashed the creature with his scimitar, but it spun out of the way in a way he couldn't have fathomed. Lucian went next, making sure to move around the creature, hoping it would split its attention. While it might have worked, Lucian was unsure as the creature still dodged his attack. It was just very hard to hit such a small target. Petra ran up with her hand axes, slashing at the will-o-wisp. Her first axe passed through the creature, almost causing it to lose all coherence. Her second axe also clipped through part of the creature, causing some of it to fade away. Umbria, knowing she only knew a single spell to hit it, shot a magic missile at the will-o-wisp, which caused it to fade out of existence. Thank you so much for listening to episode 13 of The Stolen Land. And make sure you tune in on tomorrow for the Friday show. Thank you.